everyone, I'm Gwen from Nile, and today we're going to talk a little about sharing data between tenants. As you've probably heard by now, Nile is a serverless Postgres for modern SaaS, and to support the multi-tenant nature of SaaS, Nile provides virtual tenant databases which allow you to isolate data between the tenants. Now, isolating data is great. Most of the time you want the data of each tenant to remain separate, but sometimes you actually do want to share data between tenants. For example, you're building corporate travel site like trip actions. All the data about flights, hotels, car rentals, this is all shared information. All the tenants should have access to this information. Let's dive in and see how we do it. Okay, so we log into Nile and we pick a database. This is a brand new database. You can see that it only has the built-in tables. And to start with, let's create a shared table. A table that will contain data that will be shared between all tenants. So we started with corporate travel site example. So here we have a table for all the flights. What makes it a shared table? It is a shared table because you can see that it has no tenant ID column. If you remember previous videos, we said that by putting a tenant ID column in a table, it is tenant aware, meaning that it supports the virtual tenant databases and isolation. Here, the column is missing, making this a shared table. Any tenant can see data in this table. Now that we have this table in place, let's create some flights so we can show you some things with the data. Okay, so we populated a bunch of flights. Obviously, this is just an example. In normal use cases, you will not be manually populating flights here in the console. You'll have some process that gets flights from the Sabre website or however you integrate with airline information and populate it that way. Now that we have data, we need to query it, and you query it very normally. So you can select from flights, or if you want a specific flight. Nothing particularly exciting or interesting. Now, you can also join multiple shared tables together. So let's take a look at an example. You see all those airport codes? Let's say that we want more information about those airports. Create a table with airport information. Delightfully normalized. And now let's populate it with a bit of data. Okay, so now that we populated the table, we want to show you a join. I'm going to join flights and airports on the from location. So we'll see the address of a location where a flight is taking off from. Okay, and if we have a flight taking off from SFO and the location is in San Francisco, which kind of makes sense. Okay, so now you know how to join shared tables, which is how you normally join two tables. There is absolutely nothing new or surprising here. What about tenant-aware tables, the ones that have data for specific tenants, and joining them with the shared tables? For this, we need to create a tenant-aware table. We're going to create booking. Each tenant, meaning each company, has the employees book flights to different places, right? So they need to store it in a table, and obviously this is exactly the information that shouldn't be shared between tenants. Every company's travel schedule is private. So let's create a table and then see how we join tenant-aware and shared. Okay, created a table for bookings. And now populate it with a bit of data. I just realized that I did not create any tenant yet. It's a new database. And if you remember, you cannot insert into a tenant-aware table without having a tenant. Otherwise, we don't know which virtual tenant database to put the data in. So let me create a tenant. Creating a tenant is easy. creating a tenant. Now let's give the tenant some data. Okay, the tenant has some bookings. And now I'm going to connect to the tenant virtual database. And then I'm going to do a query that joins both the tenant-aware booking table and the share table. First of all, connecting to tenant-aware database. This is how we do it in SQL. Telling Nile to route the connection to the right location. And then we're going to join between the booking ID and the flight ID. Is that right? So we are doing a join between bookings and flights based on the IDs of flights. Let's do it. Okay, so here is which employee booked which flight. So we have joined tenant-aware table from the virtual tenant database for that tenant to a share table. And we got a result in both because this tenant, just like any other tenant, can see data in shared tables. Now, what about foreign key constraints? So far, we created the flights table without a constraint, but really it should have one. We have the airports table, and we do want to make sure that our flights refer to actual airports and there are no mistakes. So let's drop the flights table and we'll recreate it with a constraint and then repopulate it with sample data. Okay, drop was successful. And we're going to recreate it. Do you see this? We have a constraint here. So we're saying that the airport ID has to actually match the ID in the airport table. Let's double check that I have the right column. Yep. Okay, so we recreated it with the foreign key constraint. So now we're only allowed to reference real airports. Let's try that. We're going to insert 2 flights, and the first one will have an existing airport number. But for the second one, well, Delhi doesn't exist in our airports table, so I have to make up some numbers that will not exist. Should fail on foreign key constraint. Let's try. And you can see that we are violating a foreign key constraint. If I'll remove the flight with the non-existing airport, then it's successful. Okay, so we're now doing inserts and foreign keys between shared tables. We are almost there. The last bit I want to show you is how transactions work with shared tables. It is possible to do writes to multiple shared tables in the same transaction. For example, to prevent situations where I'm adding a flight to an airport that actually does not exist yet. So let's take a look at an example. So we want to add flights from Seattle, but we do not have a Seattle airport yet. This will be a small problem, so we need to fix it. So we're going to do those multiple inserts in the same transaction, and if one of those fail, the entire transaction will roll back, so we won't be left with partial state of we have flights without airports, airports without flights, who knows what will happen. Okay, successfully inserted all of them. So the transaction was successful, and if I go into my flights, I can see the flights into Seattle. That was it. Short and sweet. So we've seen that we can share data between tenants. We can refer to this data even when we're connected to a virtual tenant database. We can join with this data. We can have joins between shared tables or between shared and tenant aware. We can have transactions between that touch multiple shared tables, and we can have foreign keys that connect multiple shared tables. I hope this will help you in building your SaaS product in case you have data that has to be shared between multiple tenants. If you build something cool, or if you're trying and have questions, you want to discuss some ideas, join our community Discord. We would love to help you out. We would love to hear about your SaaS ideas and success.